Perception is reality. Perspective shapes the world around you. I'm JJ Weinberg, and this is my perspective. Greetings and salutations. My name is JJ Weinberg. Tone's going to be a little different today. If you've been listening here on WVLP.org to this perspective podcast, I probably normally have a little bit more energy in my delivery and my tone. And there's a good reason why I don't now. And you might think it's, well, look what's going on in the world. And that's part of it, because years ago, I read a book by Thomas Merton called No Man is an Island. Thomas was a American Trappist monk, a theologian, an activist, and he was none of those things. His autobiography was called 7-Story Mountain. And a lot of what he talked about was trying to bridge Western Christianity and Eastern traditions. But I read this book, No Man is an Island, when I was in art school. And the reason why it just kind of came to me as an intuition is because it's a reflection on how connected all things are. And my tone and my motivation right now is not at a height by any means. But really, the title of the book is something that's stuck with me even more than the contents. Just the idea that no person is an island. We are affected by the world around us deeply, subconsciously, and consciously. But, just to give you an idea, this is a quote from the book. The beginning of love is to let those we love be perfectly themselves, and not to twist them to fit our own image. Otherwise, we only love the reflection of ourselves we find in them. And so the book, carries some Christian themes and, of course, Thomas Merton's Buddhist themes, and marries them together. So I'm not quite sure why Thomas Merton came to mind, all told. But I do know that today's episode is difficult to record. It's being recorded in the shadow of a loss that feels too large for language. I love language. I love words. I love exploring thoughts and ideas. But this loss feels bigger than the words can contain. Today, we're saying goodbye to a 12-year-old boy named Jeremiah. Jeremiah was my friend. He was someone I spent time with, someone I mentored, someone I listened to, and someone who listened back with curiosity and intent. So this episode isn't about any kind of spectacle. It's not about answers. It's about witness. The first episode that I recorded for this radio version of the show was Thanksgiving 2025. And I talked about something that's been anchored in me for some time. And I was talking about how gratitude isn't a feeling, it's a decision. And, I have to be clear about that right now. This is one of those moments where I don't feel grateful for this loss. I know Jeremiah's mom, Mari, great friend, she doesn't feel grateful for this loss. And so we have to be honest. This honesty, it's what matters. And I don't feel grateful, but I'm still choosing gratitude. I'm choosing gratitude for Jeremiah's impact in my life, that he's drawing me to this moment, that my perspective is completely changed. My perspective for the rest of my days is now colored by Jeremiah. So I'm not grateful for cruelty in the world, and we're seeing a lot of it around us. And I don't even want to judge it. I don't want to debate about it. I don't want to fight about it. It just fuels the flame. And I'm not grateful in the feeling for a world that asks children to carry questions that adults can barely survive themselves. But I'm still choosing gratitude. I'm grateful for connection to Jeremiah's family, Mari's mother and father, and all of the friends and the network, and the people that are showing up. I'm grateful for the fact that this love and this experience that I got to share with Jeremiah and witness in him existed at all. So gratitude in moments like this, it isn't denial. It's defiance. It's an act of defiant hope. And so I'm recording this and in advance because I'm going to be at Jeremiah's service when this will be airing. In fact, it will be airing, as I might be speaking at his funeral and reading a testimony that I wrote for Jeremiah. And I want to pause and read it for you here so you might have a little bit of a perspective of the depth and the meaning of Jeremiah in my life and the connection to all of the things that we talk about on this radio show, this podcast, the things I explore in my life, some of these things that I explored with Jeremiah. And I'm going to get through it without crying for you here, I'm sure, because the luxury of recording, I can always pause and start again. So today is Saturday, January 31st, 2026. I remind people a lot of times that I used to do this with the band always before a show. There's only one January 31st, 2026. Only one. Like we start to take for granted these days. And this is a day that we say goodbye to Jeremiah. There's only one January 18th, 2026. And that was the last day that Jeremiah was here with us. And so we can't live at the implication of that kind of weight on every day, but we also run the risk of letting days bleed together. And I think it's important that we try to find some sort of balance. So this is what I wrote for Jeremiah, and what I'm likely reading right now, even as you listen to this on the radio. Today we are gathered inside a silence that feels too large for words. The kind of silence that comes when love remains, but the voice we loved is suddenly absent. Loss like this doesn't arrive gently. It tears. It confuses. It leaves questions that have no clean answers. I want to share some perspective on the prophet Jeremiah from ancient scripture, not as religious ceremony or doctrine, and certainly not to preach. Jeremiah would have been skeptical of our preaching. Instead, I want to share his deeply human voice that speaks honestly to grief, loss, and the fragile weight of life. I want to share my understanding of how deeply the prophet Jeremiah is connected to the boy I knew. In Jerusalem, Jeremiah was called the weeping prophet because he felt the weight of the world so intensely that he couldn't pretend it didn't hurt. He felt the suffering of the people so deeply that it broke his heart. I want you to hear that again. Jeremiah felt the suffering of people so deeply that it broke his heart. Jeremiah heard his calling when he was very young. He warned against a faith of appearances, a faith that looked good on the outside but ignored the brokenness of the human heart. He spoke against cruelty dressed up as normalcy, against unkindness disguised as strength, against a world that forgets how fragile a soul can be. Jeremiah's role was to tell the truth about the present, especially when no one wanted to hear it. He warned that injustice and hollow religion would lead to disaster. He cautioned against rotten hearts that would tell comforting lies, exploit the poor, silence truth, and even use God as a political shield. Jeremiah acted out symbolic messages to wake people up, like smashing a clay pot to show how the nation would be shattered. He endured deep personal suffering and confessed despair in raw language. His honesty about grief is unmatched in the Bible. Yet he still believed in renewal. Even after everything was lost, Jeremiah spoke of hope. The promise for the future and love was to be written not on stone tablets, but on the human heart. But it wasn't blind optimism. It was hope forged after catastrophe. Jeremiah reminds us that grief and hope can exist at the same time. He reminds us that grief isn't a failure of belief. It's often the proof of love. He also reminds us that loving people sometimes means telling them what they don't want to hear. I've been thinking about these two Jeremiahs, the prophet and the boy here that we all love. The uncanny similarities have weighed heavily on my experience. Jeremiah carried the name of the prophet, and in many ways, he carried the same sensitivity. He noticed things others missed. He listened. He thought. He felt. He was sharp, curious, and quietly profound. There was a day when my little friend taught me a word that I'd somehow gone my whole life without knowing. We were driving together, just talking the way you do when there's trust and ease. And I asked him whether he thought of himself as an introvert or an extrovert. Mind you, he's barely 12 years old, and there's not a hesitation on the question I'm asking. He smiled and said, "Neither. I'm an ambivert." He explained that an ambivert is a person who moves between drawing energy from both solitude and connection. I remember being in awe. I've been trying to define the idea of being a quote-unquote social introvert the past 25 years of my life. I just didn't know there was a word for it. Yet there I was, learning it from this young soul, wise beyond his years. That moment stays with me because it reveals who he was. Someone who lived in the in-between. Someone who felt deeply, but didn't always show it. Someone whose inner life was rich, complex, and quietly brave. There's another moment I carry with me. I remember teaching Jeremiah how to ride a bike. He was older than most kids are when they learn, and there was a quiet self-consciousness about it. That tender shyness of realizing you're late to something the world assumes you should already know. We took our time. I told him that balance only comes after you trust the motion, that you can't find equilibrium while bracing for the fall. After a couple of days of trying, that magic moment arrived. I let my hand go and he was moving forward on his own. I'll never forget his face in that moment. The surprise, the smiling pride, the sudden lightness. It was freedom in motion, like every boy should feel. Balance earned by his own courage. My own legal name is Jerry. My whole life, I've resisted it. I shortened it, avoided it, softened it. I go by Jay. But Jerry is part of that same root in the name Jeremiah, the same lineage of sound and meaning. I learned just last week that my great-great-grandfather's name is also Jeremiah. Today, standing here, I feel something I've never quite felt before. A resolve, a recognition. I will carry Jeremiah's voice forward in mine. For the first time in my life, I actually feel proud to have the name Jerry. The prophet said that truth is not written on stone tablets or worn like a badge. It's written on the heart. And hearts can break, especially in a world that too often mistakes cruelty for toughness, speed for wisdom, noise for meaning. If there's anything that we can take from this unbearable loss, it's not blame, judgment, or tidy explanations. It's responsibility. The responsibility to be gentler, to listen longer, to notice the quiet ones, to remember that some of the brightest minds and tenderest spirits live closer to the edge than we realize. I love this boy. I admired him. And I promise before his family and before all of you that I will not let his voice disappear into silence. Like the prophet whose name he bore, I will carry his truth forward. I will speak with more care. I will do my best to choose kindness even when it's hardest. And I will remember that sensitivity is not weakness. It's a form of courage. May we honor him not only with our grief, but how we live after today. May each of us become a little more human, a little more patient, a little more awake to one another, because Jeremiah and his love is written in our hearts. Sharing here what I'm sharing at Jeremiah's service, it's not to relive any of this pain. It's to make sure that his voice doesn't disappear into the silence. So I discovered this name, Jeremiah, carrying a history. I'm a person who's explored aspects of all different religions, and growing up with Jewish grandparents and having the Christian background at the same time kind of put me in a different space. And I knew there was the prophet Jeremiah, but I never read the book. I don't know why. It was one that I just never really looked at much. And it wasn't until I was asked to say some things for Jeremiah, and I, to be honest, didn't think I was going to be able to do it. It's only now that after a couple of weeks here, it feels like months. I don't even know what the time frame is, to be honest with you, that some of the crying has subsided, and I've had to reread that service over and over and over again to try and, one, feel like I could get it to where it's as perfect as it can be, and to try and get through the emotion. But when I was, again, asked to write something, I didn't think I'd be able to. And then once I realized that I needed to, I felt like, no, I'm just going to cry through this whole thing, and I won't be able to do that either. And then the main thing was like, I'll never be able to make this good enough. I won't be able to step up to the task. And then I start reading Jeremiah because I'm like, well, let me go to the Bible. Let me just see what the prophet Jeremiah is all about. And I'm literally reading that Jeremiah was called at a young age. And I'm thinking of my young friend Jeremiah. And I'm reading that he didn't want to be called necessarily. And so I'm seeing this similarity with the energy that I'm going through, like, wow, wait, what is going on here? And then I start digging deeper, and I'm like, wait a second, this prophet was not someone shouting from a distant space. He wasn't offering comforting lies. And he wouldn't dress cruelty up as strength or call silence to these things of virtue. He was speaking up and warning against false religion, not faith, but performance. So like this world that looked righteous while ignoring the breaking of human hearts. And I just couldn't not feel like this is Jeremiah. I mean, I know how much he internalized things. It's obvious now. But he was, deeply into music and art. Those are the things we'd talk about the most. Super creative. And then I just started thinking about my name, JJ Weinberg, Jerry Joseph is my name. I have literally avoided, nobody calls me Jerry. And now I'm like, wait a second. Jeremiah could have easily been called Jerry. Jeremiah was a bullfrog. I'd sing that to him every time I saw him. It just came up. But anyway, realizing Jeremiah and Jerry were so closely linked, and then reading about this prophet in the Bible and realizing that he's warning against a lot of the stuff that we're seeing, and a lot of the stuff that Jeremiah, my friend, this little boy, was having to internalize, this cruelty in the world. And then like that it's my name in some capacity. And then I found out again, like I said, just last week, I found out that my great-great-grandfather's name is Jeremiah. I didn't even know that. Talking to my mom, and she's like showing me this family tree, and like, wait a second, what? This is crazy. And so then it's like I realize these names carry responsibility. And so much of my life has felt like Jeremiah the prophet. Not to preach, but to tell the truth about the present. And that's what Jeremiah was doing. Just knowing that Jeremiah the prophet was, trying to shake people up, using things to wake people up, this symbolism. And I just can't help but feel like Jeremiah wants to wake me up, my friend. And so a lot of times we talk here about purpose, man's search for meaning, Viktor Frankl. I talk about people like Alan Watts. But children and meaning in the world that they're inheriting, I mean, the sense of purpose and resilience. A 12-year-old doesn't, get to live in that kind of meaning yet. As Jeremiah was so advanced in his thoughts and his emotional complexity and his intelligence. Obviously, he's talking to me about being an ambivert. And like I said, it was just funny when I asked him that day, I said, what do you think you are, an introvert or an extrovert? I didn't even bat an eye that I was asking that to a 12-year-old, that he would even know what an introvert and an extrovert was. And he just, without hesitation, says, neither I'm an ambivert. I'm like, what do you mean? And he tells me, I'm like, I can't believe, as much as I love words, I'm a person of words, I study words, they're important to me, and that I have spent my life trying to think about these ideas about introversion and extroversion. I've probably talked about it here on the show. There was a questionnaire, and when I went to art school, with that checkbox that said, are you an introvert or an extrovert? And I looked at that question, I'm 17 years old, 18, and I checked extrovert in spite of the fact that I'd been an introvert all through high school, for sure. I mean, just shy guy. I couldn't find my place, much like Jeremiah, but he's 12. I was 18. And I checked that box because I wanted to explore changing and apprehending my own meaning. And so I checked that box, extrovert. But my whole life I've lived in this place of really wavering between these two states. And it's what Jeremiah was telling me he was. An ambivert gives me the actual word for it. Didn't even know it existed. I'm reading Carl Jung since I was 17, but never had heard the term ambivert, and a 12-year-old boy told me. So he doesn't have that kind of purpose and meaning yet. He lives in belonging. That's where children live. And I guess it feels like when belonging, it feels that fragile in this world that we have, then meaning collapses before it can even form. And we're hearing constantly about bullying in schools. And I don't know, I just don't want to make this about that. But again, I feel like the prophet Jeremiah, and Jeremiah, my friend, is saying we have to talk about these uncomfortable things that are true. But we talk about bullies. We see bullies on the world stage. You see it in their classroom, and maybe you see it amongst friends or people online on the internet. Kids. I mean, I've been a video gamer my whole life, and I'll tell you firsthand, video game chat rooms can be some of the most nasty, vile places you can imagine. The stuff that's said, the energy that's exchanged through this anonymity and no proximity for accountability. But, and if you're not ready for that, like, what's that doing? And then even if you were to say you could get away from it at school, you could get away from it at off online. Like, we see it in the media every day. It's just we're inundated, oversaturated with all of it. And just media saturation alone. It's like, here I am talking on the radio. Am I part of the problem? I don't know. It's part of why my energy in this conversation probably sounds a lot more dampened than normal, because it's a question that I have. Some of the stuff I've been seeing recently, things that I see on the world stage, specifically that we're seeing in the United States here at home, I just don't, it feels like pornography. Like, I just don't even want to see it. It feels like it's just too much. Even pornography seems tame compared to what we're seeing on the daily news. And there's a rejection to it in my spirit. And it's like, we can't be naive. We can't bury our heads in the sand like an ostrich. But just all I'm saying is, what are the effects on broken hearts when this cruelty is normalized, and when sensitivity is treated as weakness? I've seen that through my whole life as well. I mean, even if you go to someone like Gandhi, people would confuse it even then, or Dr. King, because they were, espousing nonviolence. And I remember, I think it's just a scene from the movie. I don't know if it's an actual question that happened verbatim for Gandhi, but somebody says to him, you don't believe in fighting. And Gandhi says, no, I always believe in fighting. But the question is, do we fight to change or do we fight to punish? And then he follows it up with, he feels like he's such a sinner that he'll leave the punishment up to God. So he's basically saying the work I want to do here, the change, the fight I want to have is to change things, not to punish people, not to bludgeon people. And so that's where, again, sensitivity can be seen as weakness. I mean, Gandhi would be a spiritual gangster to stand up to thugs. Dr. King, in his speech, actually, I have a dream. Some of those things that are left out or not focused on as much. Most of the cliche ponderings on Dr. King's I have a dream speech, even, which he has so much work outside of that gives us a deeper, richer narrative about things. But in the I have a dream speech, he says that they are veterans of creative suffering. And again, I think about Jeremiah being a creative and that he was having his own creative suffering in his life. And so we look at Jesus, where Dr. King would definitely cite, as well as Gandhi, for his nonviolence, that you get smacked, you turn the other cheek. Where's that? Where's that at right now? Because again, I see violence perpetuated everywhere. Spiritual, emotional, verbal, physical. And so even as we, even as people stand to some of the things that they disagree with, which I 100% understand, when you walk up, you get smacked and turn the other cheek. That's not weakness. It's a profound strength to be able to do that. And if you don't, that's okay too, but you can't simultaneously say, oh, where are all these Christians not acting Christian-like when this is happening? And then forget that you also have to turn the other cheek if you get smacked. You can't have it both ways. We got to talk about the whole thing. So, if you're 12 years old and you're living in this world that's so black and white, red and blue, like it's existential crisis. I mean, this is an identity crisis. People can't define themselves outside of their politics, outside of their religion. And it's a constant war. Mind you, like don't even think about all the other problems that an adolescent would have. And again, Jeremiah is 12, but if you saw Jeremiah, you would see what I saw, which is a young man. He was becoming a young man fast. And partially because his mom had him in a great school, the charter school, the Dunes. He's experiencing art and culture and music. We would go to his little recitals. They're singing. Jeremiah gave this great comedy performance. Man, the potential in this boy was something. But he's not safe in this world to ask who he is. How can he be? Look at what we're throwing out at adults, at each other constantly. And so that's why, thinking about it, I'm saying we've got to find a way to be more gentle with each other. It's not about politics. It's about atmosphere. I mean, kids in school, They don't even need to be attacked directly to feel unsafe. They just need to breathe air that tells them that some truths are going to make you alone. And so we have to somehow find a way to take responsibility for all of this. And I'm not blaming people. I'm not even blaming the news. Again, it just starts right back in the cycle, the finger pointing. But so much of me just wants to disengage entirely. I say this all the time, like push and pull energy. You know, if you see someone that's on the fence of any kind of, maybe they're not even aware, they're just unsure, but they're on the fence about something that you're like, man, they should not be on that fence. And you're looking at them being on the fence as already a moral, sin. You're looking at it like them on the fence there, they're already wrong, just being on the fence. But if you go and push them, you're guaranteed to put them on the other side of the issue that you're already thinking that they shouldn't be on the fence about. And then what happens on your other side of the fence? Defense. You always go on the defense when you're pushed, when you're attacked. It's going to be natural reaction, even if you're wrong. So I consistently in my life, and I fail at it, of course. I mean, I've talked a lot about my dad here. My dad had angry energy. A lot of times I get short-tempered and I have to check myself and try and rewind. And that's another thing why I'm not weighing in on some stuff right now, because I just don't want that. But like, what I'm trying to say is we need to get into pulling energy, pull people to a perspective. I mean, not pull them hard, obviously. Let the gravity of our love, of our compassion, of our hearing, of our being present, let that be part of a gravity that might pull someone in. So in the same way, we have to call people in, not out. Don't call them out. We got to call them in. We keep doing that though. We're calling people out. Oh, I gotcha. Guess what it fixes? Absolutely nothing. And it's where, for me, in seeing the place that Jeremiah went to, the decision that he had to make for himself, I say, man, like when I think about all this, all these gotcha moments, all these, like, I got the proof, here's the math. I can show you the math and you're still saying 2 + 2 is 5. It makes a person feel like, what's the point? And for me now, I'm looking at, again, just going into a different place with my creativity. Even my art is, you know, sometimes like, well, here, let me show you this. And here's the real concrete version. But now with my writing and my thoughts, I've been thinking more about writing short stories, going into even more abstraction, because I can't do it here. We can't do it here. And I understand that feeling of desperation. One of the first episodes I think I ever recorded of a video podcast for this idea that's turned into perspective. It's in the early days. It was called God's Tongue. And the idea was like, I can't remember precisely. I'll have to link it and find it on here. You can definitely find it on my YouTube. But I was saying that if I had God's tongue, so imagine that meant the full embodiment of truth, I could just take it right down your face, God's saliva and all down your face, the truth, it's there, and you could still deny it. People still deny it. It wouldn't matter. Like if I literally inherited the absolute golden truth from the sky or whatever you want to call it. Just imagine that I had it, or imagine that you had it. It doesn't matter if we don't listen, if we don't call in instead of calling out. So pointing fingers, I'm going to end up slipping back into it again. I know I will. But there's a responsibility to try and be gentler, to try and listen longer, to notice the quiet ones. Sensitivity, it's not fragility, it's an early intelligence. It's EQ versus IQ. So right now, again, beside my creativity, I'm trying to plant seeds. I have future leaning orientations of what I want to do here with some of this energy and time. And Gary, Silver Stray, the nonprofit, I haven't talked about it, I don't think, a lot on perspective here yet. If you go to silverstray.org, you can see a lot of the work that's being done in Gary through the nonprofit. But I want to do something a little different, to help build community, creativity, spaces where kids like Jeremiah don't have to translate themselves just to survive. Places where music and art aren't even extracurricular, they're lifelines. Because that's how I've felt my whole life. I've leaned into my creativity. I say constantly, I don't know where I would be so many times. Even in this moment, if I didn't have creativity, I don't know how to make sense of all that energy. And so I want it to be a place where kids who live between worlds are welcomed, not corrected. Ambiverts only. That's the idea. Maybe an art district in Gary. We see, again, when we change the environment, so much can change around us, and it changes our inner dialogue. So an art district in Gary, Jeremiah Town. It's a dream. Not today, maybe, but someday. Because the moments that Jeremiah and I shared that were the most meaningful to me, and from what I can understand from his mom, from Mari, and what he's told me himself, were those moments when we shared creativity, art, music. I remember one time Jeremiah was here at my place. We were talking about art, just the way you do when there's no agenda, no clock. He was just staying with me. And I was talking to him about Bob Ross, because he knew my Bob Ross project, of course. And he'd always ask me questions. He was so curious about things. And I would tell him, Bob always believes that creativity isn't about talent. It's about giving yourself permission, and that there's an artist at the bottom of every one of us. And Jeremiah already felt that way about himself. He looked at himself for sure as a creative spirit. And it was the first time he ever got to draw. I have it's a Wacom tablet. It's this really massive screen. Now, of course, you got iPads and everything, but I've had this since I think 2008. But it's really highly precise digital pen on a screen, and I've done a ton of digital art on my Wacom tablet. At my computer workstation. He always wanted to be on my computer. Always wanted to be on my computer. And one of the first times he was over, I think, actually, and he's like, "Oh, let me see." So I gave him, and he started going to town. It's like it was just innate. It's like he knew what to do automatically. Didn't hesitate. He started drawing. So I brought up one of my bald bobs, and he started drawing a hairdo on it. It was just fantastic. And he was just playing with it. And I just know he was absorbing it, and I was absorbing it, and we weren't teaching anything. It was just making room for creativity. And that's what he needed. He would ask me, well, how do I do this? Where's the eraser? How do I do this? I'd show him keyboard shortcuts and everything, but we weren't fixing it. There was just no pressure. It's just space to imagine. And he was in that moment as this person who creates things. And I think that's just what the world needs more of. It's why I've, went on an agenda and a journey with the Bob Ross project in the first place. It's like I just remember last year as I was really leaning heavy into it, doing the Bob Mobs and talking about Bob Ross, specifically showing up to PBS in a Bob Ross uniform, walking down Michigan Avenue with a bunch of people dressed up as Bob Ross and Big Bird and Mr. Rogers, and talking about Mr. Rogers and saying why these voices are so important. And people, would look sometimes just like with a little bit of scrutiny and say, well, they're trying to redistrict the state right now. This is the war. This is the fight we're fighting. Or look at and this is, early in 2025 through the summer. And it's like, well, look at ICE occupations and all of this. And this is what we've got to stand up. Why are you talking about these things? What is this Bob Ross? Like it doesn't make any sense. And now even more so, I know, and remembering and thinking of Jeremiah drawing a hairdo on one of my Bobs, like it's the creativity. It's the going away from the fight. It's Mr. Like, what would Bob do in this moment? What would Mr. Rogers do in this moment? Their voices, like Mr. Rogers would constantly remind children that, feelings are okay. Like you can have these feelings and you can have anger, you can have all these different things, and anything that's mentionable is manageable. That's the permission Mr. Rogers gave. It's a permission that Jeremiah needed to hear more, that children need to hear more. So I don't want to hear that the work that Mr. Rogers was doing or Bob Ross was doing is behind us. And it's why I was trying to lift their voices again. And, unbeknownst to me, they were calling it tactical frivolity. Had never heard of it before. It was just my knowing that we can bring some levity and some imagination, and that's the remedy back into this world. Bob Ross, Fred Rogers, Sesame Street, they're acting as a moral compass. They're acting as a space that children and adolescents can grow into and through, and to say, oh, okay, feelings are a great thing. Let's talk about them. Anything that's mentionable is manageable. And so I just come full circle back to it. Jeremiah needed that permission for wonder. He had it, but the choking out of everything else in the world around him, it just doesn't happen in a vacuum. And I guess at the beginning, I said no man is an island. Thomas Merton, I'm reflecting on that book. It's been 25 years since I read it. I couldn't give you a lot from it other than that the title itself has always stuck with me. But I just want to pause here. We're getting close to the end of the hour and say something plainly. In moments like this, words aren't enough. And even though no amount of money can touch the depths of this loss. There is a GoFundMe that's been created that we've got started to help support Jeremiah's mom, Mari, as she's navigating the immediate weight of this moment, funeral expenses, time away from work, the basic need for stability while the world's been knocked out from under her. So it's there. We've already reached one goal. Obviously, the more that we can get, it's just a testament to her, something that she can at least know that she's one less thing that she has to worry about right now. It's something that she doesn't need to be worrying about right now. But if you go on the GoFundMe platform and just search Jeremiah Scott, you should be able to find it relatively easily. It's there for anyone who feels moved to help, but there's no expectation, no pressure, and of course, there's no right way to respond to grief. I knew I had to record a show for this week. I've been behind. I didn't even want to show up to this moment because it felt too scary that I'm going to say something or do something wrong. Excuse me. Sorry, I've kept my composure through this whole thing. But anyway, if you choose to give, of course, you're not fixing anything. You're just simply standing with her. And sometimes that's all love can do. So for the last couple minutes here, I just want to return back to the light that Jeremiah carried while he was here. Jeremiah's life is like a song ending too soon, a canvas still needing room. And I can't finish his song. I can't complete his canvas. But I know there'll be songs that I'll write through this, and Jeremiah will come through me. We've talked about this in recent episodes. Things not happening to us, but happening through us. I can't complete his canvas. It needed more. There was more paint that should have been on his canvas. But there'll be images that I'm going to hold in my heart that I'll bring out onto the page, onto the canvas through the rest of my days as I let his light pass through me. I'm a crystal. I've talked about this in the past. The consistency is a crystal. And now I have to refract Jeremiah's light through my purpose. And hopefully, by doing so and choosing this, I choose to live in a way that makes the world safer for the next sensitive soul. Perception is reality. Perspective shapes the world around you. I'm JJ Weinberg, and this is my perspective.